Jacinta, you can go ahead and start.
Jacinta, I have clicked that. No worries.
Okay, sir.
Please respond, somebody.
Yes,
Hello?
sir. We can hear you. We can hear you, sir.
Okay. Okay. You see, the philosophy of today's class is about that research yields some kind of deliverables. Deliverables are, it could be kind of findings, it could be kind of inferences, it could be a kind of what is called new inventions. Generally, the human tendency is of, I should say, taking easy, not hard way, especially when it comes to the earning. Everybody in the world wants to be smart, do not put sincere efforts, but yet want to enjoy the best of best resources and best of best, kind of what's called, especially economical richness. It could be a small mango tree in your house. You are so with all love, you grow the tree, give the fertilizer, give the water, give all kinds of what's called nourishment so that it grows flowers and fruits. But in the night, the thief will come and take out few mangoes. The thievery or the roguishness, or I should say, the kind of stealing or kleptomania, it is called as it's a disease. Stealing is very, very, very common, and it is a part of hidden personality. But then sometimes it gives benefit. That is the problem. Stealing gives benefit. Following somebody else gives benefit. Naturally, child will follow the mother. Can we call that as plagiarism, or can we call that it is stealing? It depends how you view, what is your perspective. Nobody can be taught or self-taught, somebody else should teach. Don't we take the help of textbooks for our learning?
Sir,
But then textbooks do not tell that you
for providing
repeat
me
what
this opportunity
you
to
have
talk
learned.
about
You repeat
seniors
possibly
and
in your
colleagues.
language, in what you have understood.
I would
The
be talking about
version that
writing
you
a
have
fixing
understood
up
is
in a
slightly
simple
different
procedure.
than what
And
is
the reference
printed in the
details are
textbook.
taken, this
But
information is taken
by
from
law now, or by
CRO
kind of what is
Coursework,
called
research methodology, methods and techniques.
conduct in research or
That is chapter
integrity
4.
in research,
Anand, you need to mute
it is
your.
allowed if you have your own version of what you have understood expressed, rather than just copying. But then the rules of what is called uh, copying also gives you some kind of allowance, in the sense, if you want to see, if you feel that what the sentences the original article is having is the best for your reflection, you can use it, but it should be under quotes. So there are certain rules, regulations where you can take it, but then there is also a compensation for that, that you should cite, you should give the citation, and also give an indication for the reader that it is not yours, but indication of placing that quoted statements in a particular context is yours. So, in a way, you are a semi-author, not complete author. You have borrowed, or you have made your argument little stronger in the context of somebody else. That's what is our discussion, is it not? Research discussion is my finding in the light of somebody else's finding. So that is allowed, provided you present it as such, not as yours. So in what is called conduct of research, this integrity issue is extremely important. And the integrity is the result of research ethics, values, ethics and morals. All the three come to the picture, and that is the reason why in research area, as some other field, every field has thieves. Because after all, it is human beings. As I told you, thievery, or kind of what is called stealing, is sometimes ingrained because of the kind of continuous benefits that we derive without putting our hard efforts. What conduct research, the theme tells is, you put your hard efforts and evidence, and give evidence to your hard efforts, so that you will be safe, and you can by all means take somebody's ideas, but then present as your own, interpret as your own, tell what you have understood, rather than just copying or cutting or pasting. That is the principle in ethics. But then research field also has some kind of what is called allied interests, because research is a field where there is a student, there is a guide, there is a potential difference always will be there between the supervisor and the student. Supervisor being learning for the learning a little faster and prior than the student. But that does not mean that you should not simply copy what supervisor does or what somebody else does. Simply copying amounts to what is called plain thievery or plain stealing. That is not allowed. That is point number one. Point number two, whenever you do some hard work, the hard work has to be commensurate with kind of what is called the benefits that for the as a compensation. The benefit as a compensation is what is called patenting. In fact, this patenting, the word patent, is a legal right given by the government or the kind of what is called the ruling body of the area of the location where you live. So, patenting means you claim that your invention is because of this particular procedure, and because it has not been presented elsewhere or invented before, so you grant me patent. So the government issues what is called right to you, so that after doing certain procedures, they will give you the right. And once the right is granted, like a sale deed or something, a particular document is given in your name, then that particular invention is yours, since that invention could be the starting point for so many other applications and also furtherance of research. But there is a very, very subtle line here. And that subtle line is, once you get the patent, you get that proceeds, you get all the right to that particular invention as a property. Since just like a property, like a sthirasti, like a kind of what is called owning of or earning a particular property, you get the earning for the patent as a patent. It is important to compensate the hard worker, to recognize the hard work, and also get compensation. So that is what is called justice. So in a way, the law department will allow you to exercise your right on that particular invention. But then there are rules and regulations which we can learn, go on learning. But principally, this is the theme. First is protection from thieving, protection from stealing. Second, getting compensation. These are the 2 points that is necessary for what is called this property. Because this property happens to be of intellectual in nature, springing out of your intelligence, and also the hard work, physical as well as mental acumen, totally involved in the invention, it is called intellectual property right. So,
Sir, may I ask a question here?
yes, please.
Sir, in that in
Little
general,
sound should be little more. It's very feeble. Tell me.
Sir, is it audible, sir?
Yes.
So my question is, in the general industry, the practice, at least that I have come across, has been predominantly that individuals are not allowed to file a patent, even though the work may have been done by an individual or a bunch of individuals.
Good question. Very good question.
And therefore,
Yes.
the property rights, it is filed on behalf, it is filed by the organization. So the property rights or whatever emanates out of that patent goes to that particular organization rather than the individuals.
Okay.
Is it
Good question.
Is it different in case of an academic environment?
I will tell you. What's your name, sir?
Amit Bhadra, sir.
Amit Bhadra, where are you working?
Sir, I am right now into consulting. I am
Okay. You see, there is nothing like patent cannot be allotted to individuals. In fact, patent has to be allotted to individuals only. It's like your authorship. When you write an article, is it not yours? It is yours, 100% yours. But then what happens is, when the research is your own, funded from your pockets, not by anybody else who are funding your research, then it is an individual research and individuals can file the patent and patent can be given to individuals. But then majority of the research in India is institutionalized. In institutes, the research is conducted, and so there is what is called a indirect economic binding. The expenditure for the research that you have done becomes the criteria. So institutes, by virtue of being employers, by virtue of being having the kind of what is called paying principle, they pay you. So it is a wage that you earn, and it is not yours. So it is a payment. So the ownership automatically bestows in what's called trusts, are also kind of what is called in the name of industries, right? So when the criteria for an individual patent or an institutional patent is who is paying for that particular invention. If it is entirely yours, you have paid for everything and you have done your research at home without anything, individual patent can be completely allowable. It is allowed, right? But then it is like a joint ownership. Many properties can be jointly owned, is it not? So because we do the research funded by somebody else, and automatically whosoever funds, also gets a share. So it is a kind of what is called partnering, or I should say bartering. And also sometimes we would have given that right when we sign the appointments also. When you sign the appointment letter, they would include this clause that any patent arising out of your intelligence will be also the joint property of the organization. That does not mean you don't get your royalty. You will definitely get royalty, but it could be a kind of part of it, right? So there is always an individual benefit for invention. Have I answered your question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You remember here ethics of intellectual property rights. What ought to be done? Now, what is the meaning of this ought? OUGHT. Anybody? Anybody? Give me the meaning of this ought. Just attempt.
This is kind of some enforcement.
Exactly. Mandatory, compulsory, 100% should. You see, it is a little stronger word than what should be done is by kind of what is called compulsorily done. What ought to be done is, if you don't do it, you will be punished legally. That is what is called the meaning of ought. Ought means it's a stronger word and the meaning is same as should. And there is, it can also be would also. Would means the lowest in the grade. Shall is the should be the little bigger, mandatory. You can't think of, there is no doubt there. But what ought means, legally you are bound to do what legally you should do. That is what it's a legal right you get if you use the word ought. Matter of principled sensitivity to the right of others. This is what is called ethics discombetels. So it's a principled sensitivity. So there is a kind of what is called personal conscience, conscious conscience, and sensitivity. You should be sensitive. You should be straightforward, honest, telling that particular ownership is yours. And when once you prove that, once you claim and prove that with evidential documents, then you will receive what is called right to for that particular property. That is what is called right. If the right is always a kind of exercisable things, or in other words, I should say executable things. You can execute in the sense that you can sell it for a price or for a kind, or you can also gift it. See, everything, the property meaning is same here, but here the property kind is little different. Property is not physical in nature like a house or a piece of land, but it is the intelligence or intellectual property, or in other words, what you have found or what you have invented. So this is ethics and IPR. There are certain rules, certain regulations, which limits or constraints whatever that is your invention. In fact, whatever you are all, when it is giving you the right, it also protects the right of others who have invented. So there is always a kind of what is called having kind of your house key is yours, your neighbor's house key is theirs. It can't be the kind of what is called interchanged. You can always execute yourself. You can like depending on you, because it is, this whole invention is yours. That is the spirit of what is called intellectual property right ethics. In other words, indirectly it tells you can appreciate somebody else's property, but you cannot steal, cannot have any kind of ownership whatsoever of others properties. Similarly, it applies to your property also. No other person can eye on your property, can steal your property. Both are exclusive, so the rights are also exclusive. This just a list, because intellectual property right itself is a big course that I generally teach. Takes almost a year to teach, and that is the vastness of intellectual property right. But I have just summarized in one slide whatever that is basically that is needed. Generally, Indian patent, all patents have kind of time for that matter. So when you file a patent and patent is granted, that particular property will be yours for 20 years. Afterwards, it becomes state property and also public property. Public property. Design 10 plus 5 years. For example, for many people, especially engineers, they do design researches. For that, it is 15 years. 15 years that design is yours and you can use it, sell it, and get the proceeds out of that and get a royalty out of it. If you sell, proceeds means cost price, whatever that you quote, that price in one stroke they can give you and purchase that particular right. The trade secret is another kind of intellectual property.
Sir, one
right?
question. Why is it written
Yes.
10 plus 5 years, sir?
Yes.
Why
What's
is it
that?
written 10 plus 5 years?
This 10 plus 5, see, actually, in the first 10 years, they will, the entirely design is yours. In fact, there is a binding that your name and your this one has to be quoted if somebody else uses it. Not
Okay.
just the compensation, but also quotation, citation. The owner is somebody else, I am using it and I have got the permission for 10 years. But later on it tapers down because that design is being used by him and you knowingly with your knowledge, that tapers down and it extends up to 15 years. After that, it becomes a public property. You cannot have that legal right and fight for somebody else using it after 15 years. So first 10 years, they have to cite your name also. Instead of both money compensation, your name also has to be given to that particular design. The name will be in your design. The design will be in your name. After 11th year, it tapers down. There is no legal binding that your name should be given, but you will get the royalty. You will get that compensatory thing, but you will not get the name. But after 15 years, you will not get name also. You can, some people can give. Nobody gets punished, or there is no punitive extension after 15 years, or punishment extension after 15 years. That is the meaning of 10 plus 5. But in case of, that is for the designs, because designs are generally alterable now and then, very fast and very see, there is a reason why 15 years are given for why it's differential for patent. For example, models, designs are just like models, no? The car models or telephone, cell phone models, they cannot, economic value for that particular model over a period of time because of frequent usage, and this one becomes faded away. So people want that variety little faster. So designs are faster to conceive, faster because it is faster to conceive. Their what is called expiry date also is smaller. So whereas patent is not like that. Patent is something procedural patent or an invention which will last for longer time. That is perhaps is the main reason why for design it is 15 years and patent it is 20 years. If somebody infringes within that 15 years for design, 20 years for patent, you will win the case because it is the complete property remains in your name and your stead. That is the reason why design is little less and patent is little bigger. The third one in patenting is trade secrets. This can remain forever. Patent secret, trade secrets forever yours, because until somebody reveals, there is no somebody here, it is yourself. Until you reveal yourself, it is your own properties. That in other words, trade secrets are extremely protected. For example, Coca-Cola design, the emblem of Coca-Cola is a trade secret. The formula of the Coca-Cola is a trade secret. Many people have tried to do something and to do what is called duplicate it. They are not been successful. Like trade secrets is forever your property. That also you can apply. The copyright is one thing where there is the life of the author. If you live, that is up to whenever you live, still you live, or 60 years and above that, the copyright also is loses. This copyright is more in the domain of music, in the domain of arts, in the domain of artifacts and structures. Copyright. Last one is the trademark. As long as it is used, the trademark remains yours. Trademarks remains yours. Okay. So it is always good you make your mind today itself to have any one of these in your life. It could be a patent, it could be a design, it could be a trade secret, it could be a copyright, it could be a trademark. If you have this, then you are known, recognized by law as an intellectual. Please remember. See, don't worry about this H index and authorships and other things. If you want to do, see, this is what generally 99% of research scholars want to do their own something, and they should be recognized for that, and it should be recorded and kind of what is called compensated. So it is good you make up your mind to work so hard and create such a novelty, such a new thing that it can be patented, or it could be a new design, a trade secret, possibly copyright, or a trademark. So it is good that you make up your mind when you do the research, right? It is good. You see, when we were students, I should say, we did not have this knowledge of IPR. In fact, patent in India started very late, in 1970s. It's not very old, whereas in patenting in Europe and America started very early, and they are very conscious of it, very conscious of it. See, cultural values also differ. You see, ownership, transfer of ownership is also important. Even today, India is ridden with lot of dogma. You see, you earn so much of your property, but you die without writing a will to anybody else and create lot of problem to your children. So whenever you earn something, this transference, enjoying first and transferring that particular enjoyment to somebody also is extremely important. In fact, in UK, you can't live without making a will for your property. So that is the consciousness, that is the level of what is called forwardness. That is how the development comes. But in India, we have our own what's called, I should say, familial family secrets, which many times broken, many times ends up in civil courts. A lot of litigations can be completely avoided if you really in letter and spirit follow the intellectual property right principle. Like we follow for properties and end up in lot of disputes, but be very, very conscious that when we live, we enjoy, and when we go also, the somebody else should enjoy. That should be the so writing a will is not a kind of generosity, it is a kind of duty, right? So enjoyment of your hard work is important, and also enjoyment of somebody else of your property is also equally important. So we will have to make what should say arrangements for that. Legally extremely important is legal. Intellectual property right is a legal issue, it's a legal requirement, and it's a I should say both the right as well as the duty of every citizen. Now, there are tenets of ethics. In other words, here tenet is legs, like a table standing on four legs. There are tenets of ethics. What are the four principles of ethics, especially from the research point of view? It does not differ to any other field also. Ethical tenets are always same, but then we will orient and learn from the point of research ethics. The first tenet is what is called autonomy. Anybody know the meaning of autonomy? Somebody please try. What is autonomous?
which is guided by self, Father, sir, which is guided
Yes.
by oneself.
Yes. It is self, but it is respecting self.
Yeah.
Now, what is this respect of self known? Because, see, it is a very interesting thing here, I should say. As I told you sometime later, all physical entities like, human beings, the ownership is somebody else, but we live as individuals. Please understand. When the ownership is somebody else, that is, I as Krishnamurthy is not owner of Krishnamurthy. Please remember, I am not the owner of my body. Somebody else owns my body. So there, when two parties are there, there is always a kind of what's called mutual trust and mutual respect. So I cannot harm Krishnamurthy. Though it is me, I cannot harm. I will have to respect. I will have to have what is called, uh, I should say, here respect is self-respect. Self-respect, respecting the self, because the self is 50% yours, 50% somebody else's. Physically, somebody else is the owner, but you have been given what is called power of attorney. Power of attorney means right to live, right to live. So life is mine, but it is given by somebody else. Life is led by me, but it is donated by somebody else. So when two parties are there, this autonomy is extremely comes. Respect for self is the guiding principle why suicides are culpable. See, this is what law says. Suicide is not respecting self. You are trying to harm yourself. No, that is not allowed by law. It is not allowed by law. It is culpable. It is punishable. So here respect means have your self-respect, because 50% of that particular entity as your body is somebody else's. That is what is the meaning of autonomy. Although yourself, that self is divided into two, because you are leading the life, but life was given by somebody else. It is a very subtle principle. Many people do not know. Autonomy means respecting yourself. That does not mean self-glorification. Glorification is exaggerating yourself, which is bad. But respecting yourself is a right, R-I-G-H-T. So that is what is the meaning of autonomy. That is the first tenet of ethics. If you respect yourself, you will automatically respect somebody else. That is what is important. In other words, it is the reverse. You try to respect others, that is your parents who give the body, who gave you the body, so that in a way that you are respecting yourself. This is what is the meaning of what is called autonomy. Autonomy means you have the right, but the right is always shared by the owner as well as the person who is given a power of attorney. So that is what is called self-respect. The next one is extremely important, is beneficence. Whatever you think, whatever you do, these are the only thinking and executing. Both these particular acts, thinking as well as acting, which are verbs, should benefit, should have, or should result in benefit. Your thinking should benefit, the action should also benefit. So beneficence means at mental level and at the physical level, it should not do any harm. That is what is called beneficence. Any effort that you do should be to the benefit, and it should be an explainable benefit, and it should be an evidential benefit. Please understand, evidence means court. Before court, you should be able to defend that yes, your thinking was good for that particular cause, and you also became good because you did that. So both thinking and doing should be in consonance or should be congruent and end up in beneficence. So it is important. Second tenet of ethic is any act, both thinking and acting, should benefit you and also others. That is the meaning or summary of beneficence. Non-maleficence, similarly like beneficence, not thinking at the thinking level, not harming either yourself. Sometimes we can harm others. Your thinking can harm others, right? That should not be there. Even at that level, you should not harm others. That is what, because the philosophy is, if you don't think at all bad, you will seldom do bad. That is what is the spirit of non-maleficence. Non-maleficence is no malified intention for both self and others. All this copying, stealing, thieving, they're all arising out of thinking only, and that is not allowed. Non-maleficences, you cannot think that I is to steal somebody else's mango without kind of what is called due permissions and due what's called licenses. The last one is the biggest tenet. I should say the tenet, gravity travels from top to bottom, from respect to justice. Respect, yes, something is with you. Beneficence, something with you and also others. Non-maleficence, at the thinking level, only with you. And justice, both with you and dispensing for others. Justice is do justice to your own self. Don't harm. If something imminent harm comes, you can fight for it. That is meaning of justice. Get the justice to prevail. You see, just the justice to prevail. So justice is fairness. No amount of what is called disproportionate sharing. Whosoever is done some work, give the credit to them. See, in research, because it is involved with many individuals, justice becomes the prime factor, and it is extremely difficult because many times the other person who is associated with you can be called associate, but doesn't get the benefit as the prime. So when you do this, especially when it comes as a deliverable like a research article which has arisen out of your effort and also somebody else's efforts, you should always give justification why you are giving authorship to somebody else. In fact, nowadays, even many publishers, insist the role, regulation, duties, responsibilities of each authors. Many times in India, this happens. We are not discussing who should be the beneficiaries when we do or when we when we start the project. Beneficiaries are not listed because we are more interested in incidental benefits, not lasting benefits. That is the problem. That is why we can't do justice. So we give authorships to whosoever we want, which is not correct. You should justify all those people whom you have included as authors and tell before the court of law that this work was not mine, this work was given was by somebody else. That is the reason why we are now, when we list the article, it is not list starting from top to bottom. The list runs horizontally. That means every person you are mentioning as authors has the equal benefit. They are on the same line, not one below the other. That is called justice. If you put one below the other, there is always a ranking. People think it is a ranking. So it is always listed horizontally. So justice is giving what others are due according to their merit, according to their work, which you consider as fair, F-A-I-R. That is called justice. Now, one or two, I have already explained about this, then we will run fast. Principle has two separate moral requirements. Moral means, by law, by code of law. Respect others' autonomy. Like you enjoy your self-respect, others also have to be respected. In case of diminished autonomy, please fight legally to give. Though if the person is not alive, give for the legal representative the respect. Beneficence, do not harm yourself and others. Maximize the benefits and minimize the harm. Non-maleficence, psychological violence, extremely important because it's at the thinking level. Many people this is what is that psychological problem of sadism, kind of gratification, kind of vengeance, kind of revenge. They are all misconduct only. They are all misconduct. So at the thinking level, we should not do. Many people, for mischief purpose, pull out a wire of an instrument just for a fun, but that is seriously taken in research. You can't meddle. You can't do that without, because it is causing harm. So at the thinking level, be very, very clean so that the act becomes naturally clean, obviously clean. Psychological violence, sometimes, research community also is, because of human nature, it is also not free from lot of exploitation. Women workers are exploited, the subjugation, subordination, expecting some private work by supervisors. These are all very, very bad thing in research profession. Psychological violence, aggressive behavior, bullying, patient negligence in the medical fraternity is, considered as sister of beneficence and pillar of ethics. This non-maleficence, I should say, is an abstract mental domain, predominantly mental domain. So don't give chance to think bad, so that your action becomes bad and both are harmed. You may sometimes escape, but then you will get a time then you can't correct back. Even though you want, you may not be able to correct it. So thinking level is extremely important, and it should be clean. The last one is justice. Every person getting the share what they deserve, according to their need, according to their effort, according to their contribution, and according to their merit. Extremely important. So you have got to be fair. You have got to be fair, very fair in distributing the credit or the deliverable when something comes at each level of research work. Now, why should we talk about research ethics? You see, there is a beautiful work, especially it's a publication I have taken from National Institute of Health, United States, who did an anonymous poll survey of 3,247 scientists, whether they followed research ethics in their work. That is the actual question. It is a big questionnaire. Lot of revealing facts came out of this, because people were very, very open. The number itself is quite big. 3,000 scientists, recognized good scientists who had a lot of publications, lot of deliverables, they were included in the study. And why I am presenting this is just to know, under different misconduct headings, what people have revealed themselves. And that is a startling, I should say, revelation. No matter of the percentage. Some percentage may be more, some percentage may be less. That is not very important for us. But the list of, or the categories of how they have confessed is extremely interesting and important. Let us see one by one. Percentage of scientists who admit that they have engaged in behaviors listed in last 3 years of their profession. Okay. You see, 27%, have told they did not keep adequate records. So it is not just in India, but it's an oligo truth everywhere that all records are not kept. So when the records are not kept, when it cannot be defended, so that is a big misconduct. So it is important to keep records. Either a journal or a newspaper or a worksheet should never be lost. Start filing them, start writing in ledgers or registers, so that it is already stitched, so that whether it is trivial or whether it is very serious, let the time decide, but you don't decide not to record. That is the meaning. 15%, dropped observations or data points as a gut feeling. They felt it could be wrong, even though they did not ascribe any reason for it, and simply deleted it. It is good, it is bad, it cannot be, it is not allowed. Using inadequate, inappropriate research designs. They cannot explain it. They did not see. They have it. Your research has to follow the design which is prescribed. If it is little beyond, you should give the reason. That's all. So designs are plenty. Explain you followed that to some extent and modified to some other extent, but seldom. This 13% of the people, of 13% of 3,247. Confess that they did not deliberate or give adequate or appropriate research designs, followed research designs. Overlooking others used flawed data or a questionable interpretation. This comes out of non-critiquing. See, whenever I told you, critiquing criteria, whenever you read an article, you should take an upper hand as a judge, but you have overlooked it. You have just glorified that person because it is in the print. So that also is about 12%. Withholding details in methodology. Plenty of people in India do it. You see, methodology should be as crisp, as specific, as smart, and as convincing as possible, like standard operating procedures. It's extremely important. People have confessed they did not do that. Inappropriately assigning authorship credit. Maximum in India, we call them as ghost authors. They did not do anything, but you want to please them, So that psychophancy has no place in research. So you can't give credit if you cannot defend their work, or you cannot defend their part of work in your research work. So that is not pardonable. Failing to present previous research data that contradict. In other words, you are not transparent. That means you are holding some information. Somebody have contradicted your findings, but you did not discuss. That means you want to project. In other words, you want to glorify your work and undermine somebody else's. That is not allowed. That is a misconduct. Multiple publication of the same data or results. Little modifications. Journals are plenty, thousands and thousands. So you can always, the publisher, right? So multiple publication of the same thing, changing some subtle either figures or tables and getting the number of publications as more to your credit, again cheating yourself and cheating others. Unauthorized use of confidential material for their own research work. You have used somebody patient and you have revealed, that is the principle of ethics. You can't. It's anonymity. Confidentiality should be always protected. Confidentiality, if you reveal or diverge, that means it is a misconduct, and that is not research ethics. Using others' ideas without permission, nor giving credit. See, if you give credit, it is always safe. So it is better you practice from where you have taken as far as possible when you present, and also tell directly, indirectly, that you have borrowed the idea, you have followed that principle. There is nothing wrong in that by divulging the information. But when you are caught, it will be very tough. As I told you, when you are caught, even punitive things it can be punished. You can be blacklisted. You can be dragged to court. You can be, humiliated. So let us not, get into those kind of areas at all. Falsifying or cooking up the data. There are three important misconduct. All this misconduct is categorized into three: FFP: falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. In fact, under the plagiarism, these three things are extremely important: falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism are equally important. Many people list all the three as plagiarism under plagiarism. That means directly or indirectly getting idea, even stealing idea, or somebody else's work as putting yours, That is what is called falsifying, fabrifying. So there is one very important research agency called, ORI, the Office of Research Integrity, under the US Department of Health and Human Services. Please read this. It's around 45 page document. It's available. I am giving you the website. Please read it. It gives the complete gamut of what are all the acts that account as plagiarism, or what all that is included as misconduct in research. I am just giving you the glimpses. Questionable, unacceptable practices, not limited to only whatever that I am discussing. There are plenty, but there is no scope. But we should be cognizant of these things. Misconduct in research, So the FFP, very important. That is the central theme of ethics: falsification, fabrication, plagiarism, questionable, unacceptable research practices, violating traditional values of a research enterprise, may be detrimental to the research process, inadequately supervising research subordinates or abusing them, misconduct, other misconduct, unacceptable behavior not specific to research environment like harassment, misuse of funds, bullying, sometimes, extortion. All those things are possible because, after all, human being is selfish primarily. So cognizantly, we should recognize that we are amenable for this proper negative characteristic, and be guarded that we should not practice it. The first thing is what is called, cardinal sins. This FFP is called cardinal sins in research profession or research ethics. Falsification, some data, all those things are very, very evident. I don't want to just elaborate it. Falsification is nothing but omission or commission of the data, adding or deleting something what you observed. Is both are bad. Falsification can include manipulation of research instrumentation, materials and processes, manipulation of images, figures and pictures possible. These are all called falsification. Just to defend your work, you can't do this falsifying, or you can't falsify the data. Data is observation. Please remember, observation springs out of actual work, and when you get a data point, it has got to have an explanation. It can be wrong data, no problem. Wrong or right is not the important thing, but right is very important. Being fair is very important. Next is fabrication, construction, addition of data observation. So in a graph of 5 points you got by experiments, you do only 2 and then add 3, or you get 4 points and extrapolate this next point. That is wrong. So whatever that you have got, you need to present it. Filling out the rest of the experiments runs. After all, it is numbers. You can increase by giving the numbers. Nobody will question you. But that is not correct. It is self-cheating. And if you are caught, that is a fabricated data. Because you did not observe it. You did not get it. And incomplete things, incomplete claims is also a kind of fabrication. Fabrication is something cooking up, something making up, something adding. That is not allowed. Which is not observed, but you are adding it. The last one is the most important. In fact, even fabrication, falsification is generally in many textbooks are discussed under plagiarism. Representing others' work as yours. In other words, in common parlance, it is stealing of ideas, stealing of work, stealing of sentences, stealing of words, sentences. Sometimes whole lock, stock, barrel, sometimes part, sometimes synonyms. They are very, very bad. Researchers must be aware to cite all sources and take careful notes. Careful notes. So that is the reason why you have to keep all the documents yourself, so that you can show, even in raw form, you have noted it, you have observed it, you have seen it, you have come across with it. That becomes a good defense. Plagiarism is perhaps the most common form of research misconduct. In the entire world, plagiarism is not allowed, especially in developed world. It is punished. Many times even careers have been lost. Many times the grades are cut. Many times, lot of very bad punishment is being met if you plagiarize. Other misconducts, question of unacceptable practices, impairment of research work, somebody else's because of sheer jealousy, sabotaging somebody else's work, so that you have some personal rivalry. Things happen. Things, contaminating a media, contaminating a culture, or making the spike buster not available, or pulling out a wire. Such silly things do happen. because of sheer jealousy or negative characteristics. So it is not. It has no place. Perhaps the last slide: misuse of one's position. Sometimes supervisor, putting lot of pressure, lot of weight, and telling everything the student does has his own. Very, very common. But then that is also not allowed. It's also a form of misconduct. Puffery, one article divided into many things, or blown up certain things which is not actually existing, stuffing, failing to give credit of others, other scientists, not citing properly, exploiting discretionary information. You see, it is good that even in presentations you give kind of what is called credit, but it could be a distraction, but then you can list it at the end. It is possible, but it is better you always, if it is taken by somebody else's, give it at the first or in the middle or in each slide or at the end. Better you give. And sometimes you have used your sentences, so there is no need. You have interpreted in your form, so there is no need. So it is good practice to give credit willingly and openly and transparently. Exploiting discretionary information for one's work, failing to retain significant research data, confidentiality, maintaining inadequate records, refusing to give peers reasonable access to unique research publication is a duty, as I told you, using inappropriate statistical tests or statistical data, statistical evidential things, that is also a kind of misconduct in research. In other words, simply for impression's sake, you should not test too much, which is not needed. Statistics gives some kind of result, but that does not mean it is not showing the scholarly behavior, but showing what you got, what you really obtained. That is most important. Well, it can be avoided by simply knowing it, understanding the policies, having a browsing or look at the guidelines, and also the rules, regulations that bind research. Extremely important. You can avoid to a large extent or minimize the possible errors inadvertently that can creep in, even for the good-minded or well-balanced scientist. Now, that is the discussion on ethics. Now we go to like research designs. We have sampling designs as well. Because I did not cover this when it was when we discussed about research designs, we take it today and then discuss for next 10-15 minutes. What is this? Sampling and sampling designs. Equally important as a research design, sampling also is important because this is the source of data. This is where the observations start, observations come up. We handle samples, we manipulate samples, we work with samples so that we get some data, right? So sample and sampling designs become crucial, like research and research designs in our experimental stages. Difference between census and sampling. Sample is a representative of the complete population or universe, you see, and there are certain guiding rules to do this sample because it has got to be representative. Representation means true reflection of the entire, because seldom the cost and so many other factors which both of either Anand or Kavita explained to you now, we end up the sample and sampling becomes an inevitable stage, and how to avoid certain things and how to follow certain steps, they will be able to tell us. We will start our discussion about sampling designs just now. I think I have one more slide. Census is why I am telling these two sentences, census and sample. Census means sampling whole, WHOLE. There is no leaving of any unit, any member or any sample at all. If you sample, in other words, census is little costly, impractical, but gives a more reliable information than sample. What we should understand in sample and sampling is, we are as research scientists, even though follow cognizantly so many steps are amenable for errors. So in other words, the sample and sampling gives the error knowledge of errors. Once you get the knowledge of errors, it is possible to correct, it is possible to minimize. You see, after all, if you want to take a survey, you will have to consult, make a survey form and then administer it to somebody else. But then how are you sure that the persons who are answering you, they have given the correct answers? They have given the correct right set of mind when they answered? Because, even as a teacher, I know for myself, very honestly, that I cannot do complete justice when I evaluate about 600 or 700 answer scripts. First 5 or 6, I will see very consciously all the things, but then that consciousness, dilutes, and then, my objectivity goes, wanes away, subjectivity comes, so many things are amenable, but we should be cognizant of it. We should be aware of it. Why? Because we have to dispense justice. We have to get the right answer, and we also sure that the answer that we have got is qualitatively superior rather than being correct. You see, impossible to get correct because that is an ideal situation, but qualitatively we can be near to the correctness. That is what is the philosophy of sample and sampling. So discussion of what is that possible errors, what is that possible bias, what is that possible bad things that can happen, and how good things can be practiced is what is sampling and sample comes. Census is total sampling, whereas sample is a part of sampling or a representative sampling. With this introduction, now I request I think Kavita, madam.
Yes, sir.
Can you, I will stop sharing. You can
Yes.
start your presentation.
Yes, sir.
Kavita madam will be talking about sampling designs, those designs that are available, and some characteristics of those designs she will be able to let us know. Then Mr. Anand Kumar K. Shalat will tell us about the sampling procedures. By this, we will be knowing about what is actual these designs and how important they are to be followed, and what precautions we have to take to minimize the bias or the error that is possible during sampling, formulation of the design, and also actual sampling work. Yes, madam. Is all.
Sir, the screen is visible, sir.
Yes, visible.
Yes, it's visible.
Everybody is seeing it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank
Yes,
you.
madam.
Yes, sir.
Start, madam. Now the time is 7:30. I think you can have about 20 minutes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Can you
sir.
cover in 20 minutes? Don't worry if it is.
I think, you have given me a small topic. I should be able to cover.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, sir. Good evening, friends. Today I'm presenting a very small topic, steps in sample design. So before we go into sample design, there are basic definitions which we should know. And sir has given a beautiful introduction explaining what is census and universe. But I thought again I will brief you all. Now, universe refers to the set of all the units which possesses a variable characteristic under study. Now, example, in a study of achievement motivation of the students of grade 8th of Bengaluru, if I take, the set of all students in Bengaluru are studying in standard 8 can be considered as universe. But then population means a set of group on which findings of the research are to be applied. So keeping that example which I have given above, if I say if the findings research are restricted to the students who are studying in Kannada medium, then the population which consists only Kannada medium students of grade 8 will be called as population. And then in population, there are various different types of population. Finite population, if I say, I am considering 10th standard exam who are taking up in the year 2022. That can be a finite population which can be calculated. But as infinite population can be, I can take an example, words formed using English alphabets. It is impossible to calculate, or number of cells in a human body. That is an infinite population. Same way we have homogeneous and heterogeneous population. Homogeneous is identical. uh, Usually, the areas are in social science, education, or psychology. However, by apply, it is impossible to get that thing, but it's little difficult. By applying some statistical method, we can use maybe blood in a living being, a crop produced in a particular form, or a DNA matching from two persons can decide whether they have blood relation. All this can come under homogeneous. Whereas heterogeneous is, again, they're having different completely in aspect of one or the other. Like all the students of the same school and class differ from one another in different mental or physical abilities. Like this, we have under population, various types of population we have. And then the sample, as sir said, a part of population that represent completely is known as sample. It means the unit selected from the population as a sample. Okay, the process of selecting a sample from the population is called sampling. A method used to select a sample is called sampling method. I hope I'm clear with this. Then we can move on to the sampling frame. A sampling frame is a list of all the items in our population. It's complete list of everyone or everything we want to study in the research. The difference between a population and sampling frame is that population is general and frame is specific. Like example, here we have used telephone directory as a frame for conducting opinion survey in a city. Or maybe if I take another example, population, maybe I'll say, I'll select all the birds that are pink in color, and the sampling frame will be the birds like brown-caped, rosy finch, white-winged crossbill, American flamingo. So that can become a sampling frame. Now, sampling design method generally refer to the technique used to select sample units for measurement, like individual from a population or location to a sample within a study area. Before sampling design methods can be considered, it is necessary to have thoroughly defined the population, the area we must study, the sampling unit, and sampling objective. So that is very, very important. And sampling error, I think our friend Anand will be throwing some more light on the sampling error. I'm explaining a basic definition. A frame error occurs when the wrong subpopulation is used to select a sample. A classic example which I found very interesting, I picked up from the Google. In 1936 presidential election between Roosevelt and Landon was a thing. The sample frame was from car registration and telephone directories. In 1936, many Americans did not own cars or telephones, and those who did were largely Republicans. So the results wrongly predicted a Republican victory. So that was biggest error in the sample. So that is one of the error. Then the response error, as we said, the word itself says responses. The respondents, when we are conducting the survey, give false information, either by mistake or maybe they don't want to give us the right information or misinformation. This can lead to a response error, a chance error, or it is called as a random error. It is very difficult to predict because there are a large number of parameters when we conduct an experiment, and most of those will interfere into our result. So now this is the outframe of our error where we get the response error. The total sampling error will be response error, the chance or the random error, and the frame error. Now this is our topic, steps in sample design, as 7 major steps before we go on. type of universe, I think in the beginning itself, I explained what is an universe, and sir is also thrown light. It can be finite or infinite. Fixed, if it is finite, it's got fixed number of elements. Like example, population of a city or number of workers in a factory. And if it's infinite, like example, I said even blood cells or number of stars in the sky. That is our defining population. The second step is sampling unit. The population unit selected in a sample is called sample units. Can refer by a single person, animal, plant. For example, if you conduct research using a sample of university students, a single university student can be a sampling unit. Or a conducting online research, 50 households can be picked up, and that household can be, one household can be our sample point. Like a sampling units taken from entire population, a country, a customer database or a region, then put them into a smaller group for a research sample. This group of units then used to research, analyze, and draw conclusions on it. This becomes our sampling unit. Then we have a source list, which is the list of population units from which the sample units are selected is called sample frame. The frame must have the following qualities. It should be up to date. It should contain full information from the sample units. To ensure no repetition of the sample units are there, the list must be suitable for the coverage of the study. The list must be reliable. That is most important. Missing elements, no coverage, incomplete, all that should be avoided. And duplicate listing of elements should be checked once again. That is our source list. That is selecting the items. Then the size of the sample. It is a subpopulation to be studied in order to make an inference to our reference population. Like as we said, census is quite large. Then how to take the size of the sample is an important factor to be considered in sampling. The optimum sample size is required. And optimum sample size is one which fulfills the requirements of efficiency, representative, reliability, and flexibility. Deciding upon the type of sample to be used, the researcher has to decide which sampling is better, and from the population, the basis of the nature of population and objective of the study. Because of the constraint of budget, which is their part of it, and representative sample is very, very important. Larger the size, more accurate the findings would be. Then the fourth one is parameter of interest. It is a measure of characteristic of an entire population based on all elements within that population. For example, all people living in one city or all male teenagers globally, all elements in shopping trolley, all students in a classroom. Now I can give an example of this parameter of Insta with one example. If you ask all employees in a factory what kind of lunch they prefer, half of them may say dosa or half of them may say puri. We may get a parameter saying that 50% of the employees like puri. But on the other hand, it's impossible to count how many men in the whole Bangalore likes puri for his lunch. So that could be, in that case, you're probably serving just representative sample and extrapolate the answer to entire population of men. This brings us to other measure called as statistics. It is a measure of saying something about a fraction, that is a sample under a study. A sample in statistics is a part of portion of population. The goal is to estimate certain population parameter. We can draw multiple samples from a given population, and then the result, that is the statistics acquired from different samples, will vary depending on the sample. So by using data about a sample or a portion of it, we'll estimate the entire population's characteristics. So this is a very big chapter which we'll be doing in our data analysis itself, how we will infer the results. Budgetary constraint, the word itself tells cost consideration from practical point of view have a major impact upon decision relating not only the size of the sample, but also the type of the sample. This fact can lead to use of non-profitability sample. How can we reduce the cost of evaluation? Some of which we can try. Can we use a simpler and cheaper evaluation design? Do we really need to collect all of this information? Has someone already collected some of the information that we need? Can we reduce the number of interviews or observations or cases without sacrificing the necessary requirements? Is there any other way to collect the information which can cut down my cost? So, most five strategies which we can reduce the cost is first to simplify the evaluation design, usually by eliminating the collection of data. Second is to agree with clients on the elimination of non-essential information from data collection. Third is to maximize the use of existing documentation. The fourth is to reduce the sample size. So there is definitely little possible by considering these points that we can work on our budgetary. Then the last step is the sampling procedure, is a process of actual selection of the sample elements. This requires substantial amount of office and field work. Researcher must decide the type of sample he will use. He must decide upon the technique to be used in selecting the items. Choosing a part of a population to use the test of hypothesis about the entire population, used to choose the number of participants, interviews, work samples, and use the assessment process. This is the part of sampling procedure. Now, I have taken one example to explain the 7 steps of our thing. Now, general elections during our after the election in TV channels, public opinion polls keeps coming. So, what could have been done if we divide them into the sample design 7 steps? First step is they have sampling process is to clearly define the target population. Polling agencies consider only the people who are above 18 years of age and are eligible to vote in the population. That is our first step. First step is, as I told you, population. Then second step is frame, list of all people whose names appear on the voters list. Step 3 is the design. Different samples are taken from different regions all over the country. Then step 4, for the polls, agency try to get as many people as possible of the diverse backgrounds to be included in the sample, as it would help in predicting the number of seats a political party can win. Once the target population, sampling frame and sampling technique and size has been established, next is how to collect the data from the sample. Then in opinion polls, agencies generally put questions to the people like which political party are they going to vote for us, or has the previous party done any work? So based on the answers, agencies try to interpret who the people of a constituency are going to vote for and approximately how many seats is a political party going to win. So this is how, through these 7 steps, we could get our census polling report. So steps, one summary, as I told you, steps is 7 steps, type of universe or the population. Once we fix that, sampling unit, then the source, how we collect, and the size, parameters, how we infer the result, keeping our budget in cost, and then the sampling procedure. And I have referred the W. Best book, Kotari, and most of the information from Google as well. And definitely our Professor Krishnamurthy sir helped me quite a lot. Thank you, friends. And the questions is open for the floor. I'll try to answer, otherwise sir will be helpful to help me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good, but let this slide be like say you retain this slide, ma'am. Just for some time,
Yes,
you keep this slide. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, my dear friends, it was a very good presentation. I'm sure she has learned, she has understood, she has appreciated the importance of the design. I wish all of you mentally, definitely she will be sharing this presentation to you. You see, my request is 3. One, the first thing is whenever you write your thesis, especially in materials and methods, the sampling design and research design has to figure way. It will be very good if you really take the sample parameters of interest, budgetary constraint, and sampling procedure. As a checklist, I would request all of you to maintain this so that, it becomes authentic and you become so happy that you have not left anything, untouched when you sampled a particular sample. Sampling, extremely important. Similarly, sampling procedure also becomes will follow. Part A is this very salient point here. What we should remember is that you should explain, very clearly define what is that focused sample that you have selected and how you have selected, why you have selected, how you have selected, and you can also attribute the reasons for that particular selection. So definitions become, we call this in research inclusion and exclusion criteria. Why did we include and why did we exclude? If you give the reasons for inclusion and exclusion criteria under these 7 headings, then your job as a professional sampling person will be very justified. So it is good you follow this in your work. You have the sampling design as a small chapter in material methods, and under these 7 subheadings you try to explain as much as you can about the inclusion exclusion criteria, so that people, it becomes evident for a reader, and it also guides you to be more authentic in getting further data points from these samples, from these procedures, right? So it is good, and I should really congratulate Kavita madam, who has done a lot of good groundwork. Although the material is available, so much of material is available, she has explained, giving a very apt example also. And it is good that you define your universe, you define your particular unit, you define where did you get that source, and you tell how many number of that sample you have collected, why you collected that number, and then give very clearly, throw light upon the interest, that is the criteria, what you want to investigate, the parameters of interest, and of course the budgetary constraint. In fact, that is what drives sample itself. Because we cannot squeeze all that cooked rice in 1 kg, you have to squeeze each grain if you want to ensure cooking, is it not? But we don't do that. We squeeze 1 or 2 and then extrapolate it to kind of the universe that is present. So the very philosophy is that it is first impractical to do every sample everything like census. Neither we have so much of cost and manpower at our disposal, so sampling becomes evident and it becomes necessary. So but the errors that are possible, the honesty with which you explain these steps is extremely important. Please keep this. Now we talk about sampling procedure, and really I should appreciate the efforts of Kavita madam. It is good that you volunteered and explained beautifully the small as a seminar topic, the sampling design. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much. Now we call upon our Mr. Anand, who will explain to us the sampling procedure. Anand, madam, you can stop
Yes, sir, I'm
sharing.
there, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, I'll stop sharing. Thank you, sir, for giving a wonderful opportunity. I hope my friends I could justify
Wonderful way,
something.
madam.
Thank you.
In fact, subject seminars are so important, and so it's a kind of pedagogy. And if there are teachers around, I know many of you are teachers, please follow this. There could be sparks, there could be, so much of good students who want to, who can volunteer and talk. And if they don't volunteer, you can prompt them to volunteer, so that the subject becomes so easy and becomes kind of revisiting and reiterating and repeating, so that the learning becomes concrete. Now all of you become quite confident in deciphering what are those parameters, indicators for me to explain in sampling design. You have made that so easy. and that is actual learning, madam. So please follow subject seminar mode. It is a very good, very effective mode of teaching. You can always use this, but then decide which topic has to be told, and please help that candidate whom you have identified to teach, so that they will never forget their see once. The best way of learning is teaching, is it not? So this is good that subject seminar is just I want to show how the subject seminars are run. As a representative example I wanted, but fortunately both of you volunteered, and I wish everybody of you want to talk about this, so that it becomes very near and also thick in your memory. Thank you very much for your good effort, madam. Anand, now we will start criteria for selecting a sampling procedure by Anand Kumar K. Shalya.
Good evening, everybody.
Good
The
evening.
topic here is about criteria for selecting the sampling procedure. The reference for this is from the book shared by Professor Krishna Murthy sir, is from C.R. Kothari's book, and it is chapter 4, which talks about the sampling design. I am now on slide number 2. So when we do the sampling and then we move further with the sampling analysis, there are two types of cost involved in that. These two types of cost involved. First is about the cost of collecting data. So that's where whatever the effort we are spending, the overall number of days which are spent, then multiple team members may be involved. So their time and their effort. We may have to travel to some location, or we may have to look at some equipment to do the analysis of the data, or to collect the data, or to collect certain readings. So that is one type of cost. And the second type of cost is about incorrect inference from the resulting data. So we do analysis, but whatever the output is, we should know how to go about concluding from the output what we have received. So that should be correct. So whenever it doesn't fall in line with the correct understanding of the person who is analyzing it, it will have impact on the action identification. It will have impact on the conclusion what we are arriving at, and then how we go about taking corrective action, preventive action, how we go about rectifying that. So again, that time we will spend, and we will be having the cost incurred because of that. So here we are focusing on these two parts. Now to minimize this, we need to, there are certain sampling design criteria are available, which we will be looking at in the next few slides. So here we are looking at what could be the causes for the errors, and then we move to corrections. So when we talk about incorrect inference, it is a result of a systematic bias and sampling error. Now, systematic bias, when we talk about, so when we do the sampling, we define the sampling procedure, there is a chance of some errors in that. And these errors, we cannot always remove it or make it, we completely remove it by increasing the sampling size. Sometimes it can add into that also. So when we consider the overall sampling which we are planning to create, we should learn first about what are the various procedures, and what best we can do, that we are able to minimize this, and we have to correct that. So first part is to detect it, and then second part is to correct it. So to start with, Madam explained about the sampling frame. So sampling frame is about the overall unit from which the sample is considered, and within that we have the list of samples. So here I have given a small example that sampling unit is a vehicles from a parking lot. So it will include all the vehicles, car, truck, cycles, etc., whatever is available. Another example is that we have to do some sampling with individuals. So these individuals, sampling unit for the individuals may include from the various companies and institutions and hospitals and whatever. So that is where we are looking at the overall sampling unit part of it. Now, when the error occurs, when the sampling frame is inappropriate. So what is inappropriate sampling frame? So we are looking at the overall coverage for the survey when we do the research, and then we prepare a list of the units which we are targeting, who will be providing us the inputs from the overall population. So here in the same example which we have taken, the vehicles, we have to consider only cars, not the bicycles or the trucks which are available. And we have to also consider that how many cars we want to look at as a part of the sampling related activity. So that's where we have the information available which talks about the various aspects for affecting the creation of the, or rather inputs for the inappropriate sampling frame. So this clarity must be there in the researcher's mind when they are looking at the creation of the sampling frame. So wherever we have to identify that how we go about the survey part, and we need to also identify that how what all inputs we want to consider from the sampling unit, and how we define the sampling unit. So if this is done incorrectly, it is considered as the inappropriate sampling frame. The next, I'm on sampling, sorry, I'm on slide 5. So which factors affect the system, affect the systematic bias? First is defective measuring device. So when we do the research survey, we have the interviewer is biased. The question which we prepare, it is a questionnaire has some bias. Then suppose we are for a disease, we have to do some testing from the individual sample. So the testing device may have some error. So suppose it has to show some reading. So that reading can be always either with +2 unit or -2 unit. So that will provide us the wrong report and wrong result. So as you know, based on that, we will take the actions, right? And one of the very live example in one of my very close person, his blood report showed some result. But then when it was considered for the same report in another laboratory, it had a different result. So the device which we are considering, what error it has a very important role in the output and the analysis part. Then
Sir, can you speak a bit loudly?
yeah, sure. Then the pH meter or precision balance, if any defects are there, so in that measuring device, then it will have impact on the output also. So the output will not be correct, and it will impact on the overall results which we were planning to consider. The second factor is non-respondents. So we are looking at the individuals with whom we want to do the sample, but they don't respond, and it will have impact on the overall measure. So here I have taken a very simple example with the current times, that for a vaccine, for a disease, for its vaccine survey, we have identified that we will do survey from 90 individuals, and it should be from different age groups from 5 hospitals. And these age groups are 3 age groups on the slide, 30 people each. So, but from the first age group, we have considered only 20, second age group only 10. And from the third age group, we did not do any survey. Or rather, the survey, the response were not there at all. Not survey, but the response was not there at all. And instead of 5 hospitals, we got only from 2 hospitals. So we are unable to do the required, we are unable to get the required data when we are doing the survey. So that is that is also one of the factors which is having impact affecting the systematic bias. So we have to ensure that when we plan for our sampling, such criteria are laid down very clearly, and we do we ensure that we have the respondents available who will provide answer to whatever the required information we have. Another is indeterminacy principle. That means something vague. So suppose in a school or when we were studying in the school, we used to have every year, once in a year, government officials will come for inspection. Right. So we have to be, when the inspectors come and when we ask any question in the classroom to any student, that student has to get up, stand up, and then answer nicely with folded hands and all that. Right? So that
Sir,
way,
sorry, sir, you're not audible. Can you please speak a bit loudly?
Yeah, sure. So, indeterminacy principle is something vague. So sometimes the individuals act in a different behavior while performing certain activity. So here the example is about the which is being taken is about the garment factory. So the workers or the people who are working there, they have to they stitch 10 set of clothes in 7 hours uh, when their planned time is 8 hours. But when someone is observing them, they will ensure that they take full 8 hours to complete the job. So that is something they are doing it differently in certain situation. So when we are looking at the collecting the data, we must ensure that such factors are not affecting whatever activities we are involving or the survey which we are involving, and we must ensure that those information is also being provided correctly as a part of the survey assumptions or the survey design. Then natural bias in reporting the data. So when we do the employee satisfaction survey, some employees will answer may be biased. When we have to give our salary data for a social status, we may give right or something different. But when it's for the tax purpose, we have some bias in providing that. On a lighter note, suppose Banga said does the survey now that whether it should be a closed book exam or open book exam, people like me will always go with open book without thinking anything. Right? So that also is certain natural bias which will get into the answer. And so that's where we have to look at how we take into account such inputs which we are getting from the respondents when we are collecting the data. Now, we learned about the factors affecting the overall sampling procedure and design. Now, what are the positive part of the good characteristics? So, the sampling design must result in a truly representative sample. So, when we talk about doing the sampling for a disease and a vaccine, then we should do the sampling from the people who are vaccinated and not with the people who are to be vaccinated. So, we can get the truly correct sample, representative sample. Then the design, what we consider. So we should look at the whatever design for the overall activity we are doing. It should be it should have a minimum sampling error, and it also helps us to ensure that our data and the output is as much as correct possible. Then the viable in context of funds. So when we do the research here, we look at the supposing we are doing some research in chemistry field and we have to collect certain data. So the costly laboratory equipment may impact. Then we plan to visit multiple countries or multiple different geography for some demographic, specific demography related inputs. So that also may impact on the overall cost. So that's where we have to look at that. We plan and we design our overall research in such a way that we can do that within the given identified funds. Then the systematic bias can be controlled. And the last one is about the results of the study should be applicable in general for the universe with a reasonable level of confidence. So we talk about, say, we are looking at output of some chemical reaction on a substance. So this substance to be with a certain set of characteristic, we should be able to apply on in general, not exactly on one substance, right? So we have to look at that our results what we are providing. So that will also help the overall uh, um, community. So the sampling should have these aspects considered when we are designing our samples. And here they talk about reasonable level of confidence. So the characteristics does not talk about any percentage of confidence level or anything, but they talk about reasonable confidence. We are able to conclude and it can help the future students or future researchers to take it forward. Now, we discussed about systematic bias. The last topic of my slides is sampling error. So, sampling error, we are looking at the random variations in the sample estimates. So, we have to ensure that we are able to get the correct value of that. And every time it is not necessary that sampling error will decrease with more sample. It may not happen every time, but we may be able to control it up to some extent. And we should always try to, our goal should be always to minimize it. And of course, if it's a homogeneous population, it will definitely have the impact from the characteristics of the population also on a positive part. And the typical measure which we consider for this is precision of the sampling plan, wherein over a period of time, if we increase the sampling size, the precision will improve, and it will have the impact on the cost also. It will also have certain factors from what we learned from systematic bias will also be brought in. And to make it more effective, we have to ensure that sampling design is been done in such a way that we can reduce the sampling error. It becomes over a period of time, it is becoming smaller and smaller. But in the Indian context, the practically what is happening currently, the preference is going towards a less precise design, because it is easier to do the research, it is easier to get the information. The cost involved is also little on the lower side, and we are able to have a little more control on the various factors when we are considering the less precise design. That's what the research or the experience from the multiple examples concludes. But in a way, all in all, we have to look at that how we are able to minimize the sampling error, and how we ensure that in turn the cost involved in that is not affected, or it is not it is not going with it is not going compared to what we have planned for, and we are able to complete our research and analysis based on that sampling in a given period of time. So these are the two topics which I have spoken about, where we talked about the systematic bias and sampling error. So when we do the sampling design, these are to be considered, and the samples should be considered in the best possible way to minimize the error. So if anybody has any question, clarification, if anybody, sir or anybody else want to add something from your experience, please, most welcome.
Thank you, Anand. Let me just, in 2 minutes, summarize what Anand has talked about sampling procedure. While the design is extremely important in the beginning, the procedure also becomes extremely important, equally important, if not, in fact, more of, I should say, creeping in errors is possible in the procedure, although procedures are generally standard. We call a standard procedure, but when we execute that actual procedure, so many things are possible. The summary of what Mr. Anand told is, the first is think of all possible errors. See, the errors could be personal, could be instrumental, could be procedural. Three kinds of errors are possible. There could be error in the procedure itself, but then account it, then know about it, tell about it, document about it. If the error is instrumental, possibly you can correct it. Instrument is the easiest way to correct. For example, the thermometer is having, say, for example, 0.01 or 0.1 plus or minus recording. It is easy because there is a reference equipment, you can calibrate it. But then how to calibrate human beings in a social survey? That is why social research is much difficult, because the mind or the response could be so dynamic, should be so subjective, so much of constraints of time, and also the mental status, which is so labile. We can't be as fresh at 5 o'clock in the evening as we were in the morning 8 o'clock, is it not? So when you do a study, you will have to normalize, take into account, cognize that you have to do it in such a manner to, as much as possible, elimination impossible, but minimization is always possible. So minimizing all possible errors should be the mantra in sampling procedure. The second one is the sampling, minimizing the bias, unknown thing. So follow a method. If you follow a method, the bias is to a large extent taken care. So method following becomes also extremely important to minimize. And also at the same time, if you follow a particular sampling method, the cost is also generally goes along with the method. The methods are suggested in such a way taking into account minimal cost. So minimal cost principle is achieved. The procedure, because you are following a method, the method is amenable for, because it is tested and prescribed. So you can follow that to minimize the bias. The third point is, whatever you do, please be sure that errors are there. Errors are there, but errors are minimized, and these errors are there, and how you minimized, if you explain, then you are at a safe and also correct way of conducting the. So errors identification, error correction, and error recognition and documentation becomes extremely important in sampling procedure. The last one important point is, it is because you are taking a sample which is itself a wrong thing. It is not census or whole thing that you are doing to reflect. Even if you take whole thing, these errors can creep in. That is, so the number is a thing which is not very, very significant. But what is important is generalization, that is extrapolation of what the test sample you have done to large population. If you have to do justice, you will have to follow both sampling design and sampling procedure. That is the summary of this particular discussion subject seminar. The generalizability becomes extremely important because of the obvious reasons that we cannot, it is impractical and also costly to touch each sample of the universe, or even for that matter, the frame that you have selected. So sampling and sampling procedure. Sampling is design, sampling procedure is the adoption or minimization of the errors which are direct, indirect, implied, latent, and also creeping in. You will have to be very, very cautious and do sampling. And whatever that is inadvertent thing that can happen later, you will have in a better position to explain why it happened. So you will be in a good position to tell that your finding passed through all your observations, and also the security questions that are generally come up when you go in the subject of sample and sampling. I think both Anand as well as Dr. Kavita has done a great, remarkable job. They could read, they could within a short time they could prepare, and they have done a good job of presentation. I hope the session was useful. I think today we will end with this. If there are questions, you please note down. We can always discuss it again at any point in time in the later sessions. There is a small announcement before we depart, and the next 2 sessions will be about sampling, different kinds of sampling, like 3-4 sampling. I told you, simple random, stratified random, cluster sampling. 3 types of sampling will be taught to you. And also a small, representative problems will be solved with respect to these 3 types of sampling that we come across. And then the subsequent session, the next session would be on testing of hypothesis, which will more or less complete almost everything in research methodology. So the next session, one of my PhD student, who has completed her PhD, will be handling. She will take first the sampling procedure in one session, and also test of hypothesis in the subsequent session. And then I will come back and we will talk about what is called research communications. Research communication is publication ethics, but not ethics, publication procedure. How and what are all the criteria when we have done research and have documented research in the form of thesis, how to publish the results in a manner which is objective type, and which catches the eye of a peer reviewer, and who will definitely appreciate and accept for publication. That we talk about what is called research communication. 1 or 2 sessions we will take, and then we end up the coursework. Thank you for very nice presentations, very patient listening. I know we could not discuss much because of the time constraint. It is already 8:15. You must be tired. Let us keep our discussion for the next session, maybe, possibly. and then move on with the next sessions. Thank you very much, and good night to all of you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good night, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Sir, good night, sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
sir.
very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry,